Good morning and welcome to Planet in the Word. I'm Candace, and today we're going to do a very quick video about a few things I left out in our biblical history video. I did that on purpose because I really wanted to put them all together into one video because we're going to talk about the Hebrew books that are important. And why are we going to talk about those? Well, because my whole goal is to get you out of just Bible reading and into Bible study. And as you study your Bible, you're going to come across some of these terms. And some of these terms are going to be very important to you, and it'd be helpful to understand what they are. So first of all, let's review what did come up last time. So what came up first was the Tanakh. And if you remember, that's the Hebrew word for just the Hebrew Bible. The second one that came up was the Septuagint. And the Septuagint was that Tanakh translated into Greek around 300 BC. And the third one was the Apocrypha. And the apocryphal books are the books that have historical value, are not canonized, but would have been known to all Jewish scholars of that time. And so a lot of times they are included so that we can have context to the Bible and what was going on, especially in the Old Testament period. So now we're going to start out with some new information. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is the Jewish book called the Mishnah. Now, the Mishnah was put together after 70 AD, and that's because there was a very significant event in Israel in 70 AD. The Roman army totally destroyed the temple. Now, it began what we call the Diaspora. Technically, the Diaspora began in 586. That's the first time we use that term, when Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came in and absolutely destroyed Solomon's temple and took Judah and Benjamin into exile. Really, you can make an argument that it began before that time when the Assyrian army came in and took away northern Israel. But we tend to refer to the first diaspora as the Babylonian diaspora, and that is nothing more than the Jewish people being disseminated around the world. Now, the diaspora that we're talking about of 70 AD began with the Roman destruction of the temple. And what happened is that meant that from that moment on, the Hebrew schools were closed. They just weren't accessible. And so things that had been taught that were rabbinical oral law and tradition outside of the Tanakh and the law were no longer able to be passed down. So they decided to put them together and write them down into document form, which really had not been done before. But they were very afraid of these oral laws and traditions being forgotten and dismissed and done away with. So the Mishnah was born, and it was really put together by Judah Hanisi, and he did it in about 1st century AD, around in there, 200 AD. And what he did is he collected the rabbinical writings of about 120 different writers and got them down and compiled them into one place. Now, I'm just going to give you a little bonus information, because if you ever read the Mishnah, you're going to come across two rabbis discussing the same passage. And one rabbi will say this, and one rabbi will say this, and they look very contradictory to each other. But according to Jewish thought, they're both right. We just don't see the bridge tying the two together. So that is going to be super helpful if you ever sit down and read any Jewish rabbis in Jewish thought. They're both right. Now, the next document we're going to talk about is the Targum. And the Targum is the Hebrew to Aramaic Tanakh, basically Hebrew Bible. And that happened around 1st century AD also. So now we have vocabulary-wise or language-wise, we've transitioned from Hebrew into Aramaic, and more people are knowing that language. So that was an important thing to do, so that the Tanakh was available to Jews of more languages. And then we're going to move on to the Talmud. What is the Talmud? Well, the Talmud is interesting because it's essentially the Mishnah, right? Those rabbinical 120 writings that had already been put down at a later time and added on to. It was written somewhere between, it was compiled over time. So it really it breaks down into 6 parts. But if you were to buy a Talmud today, it would consist of the Mishnah and then additional writings compiled between 100 and 700 AD. And that 600-year period had rabbis in there that were adding to oral law and tradition. So they felt that they needed to get those down. And really the end of that was at about 700 AD. Lastly, what we're going to talk about is the Masoretic Text. And the Masoretic Text is really the Hebrew Bible that was canonized in the 10th century AD. And what that meant is, as the Bible was being copied over and over, there were small changes that crept in. They were very careful to do exactly what they knew was correct. But another thing that added to that was the need, as Hebrew passed out as being a used language, people were beginning to lose how to pronounce the languages. So what they did was they took all the manuscripts in about the 10th century AD and they put them together and they brought them into the one accepted canonized Hebrew Bible. And this Bible also had the vocalization symbols that you will see today. Now remember, those did not originally appear in a Torah scroll. So a lot of times that Masoretic text will be compared to what the Septuagint says. So the Hebrew will be compared to the Greek to try and get a fuller understanding of what words were used so that we can understand the vocabulary more accurately as we read our Bible. I hope that's helpful to you. I hope that you will begin to start digging into things where these words will come up and you go, oh, I know what that is. That would just make me so happy. And if you're interested, stay tuned. The next video, we're going to talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. Have a good day.